In 1997, Stainless released a game that instantly became a cult classic that would define violent video games. But after nearly 2 decades of squashed pedestrians, twisted cars, frames, and some passable sequels, which game truly deserves to take the checkered flag? Today we are ranking every single Carmageddon game, from the mediocre to the definitive Carmageddon experience. At number 5 and the bottom of the list is Carmageddon TDR 2000. No surprise to anyone familiar with the Carmageddon series. After Carmageddon 2 was released by Stainless Games, the original developers of Carmageddon were burnt out after developing Carmageddon and its sequel for 2 years straight. Stainless requested a break from developing Carmageddon to focus on other projects. SCI agreed but went behind their back and hired Taurus Games to develop their third entry. Short history lesson out of the way. What's the game like?
I mean, it's alright,
The gameplay follows up the similar style of Carmageddon 2, with there being pickups and power-ups around the map that the player can use. Races can still be won 3 ways: finishing the laps, wasting the other races, or killing all the pedestrians. You might be watching this and thinking, damn Hyperbeam, this game just sounds like any other Carmageddon game. What's the problem? Well, the problem is with the timer. In every other Carmageddon game, the timer goes up by killing pedestrians, hitting and wasting other races, and collecting time bonus barrels. TDR 2000 does let you earn time in these ways, but the amount of time rewarded is so low that the only way to win events is by finishing laps, which for Carmageddon defeats the whole purpose of Carmageddon and actively punishes players for trying to do anything other than racing. The only positive that I can say about the game is the soundtrack slaps, with artists like Utah Saints and Plague. Also, pedestrians can fight back by throwing Molotovs and beating a car up with baseball bats, which is a nice addition. Another positive is that the game actually has a story.
The beginning of the new millennium was like the end of the last, only worse. Most people poured into new, segregated, tightly policed towns where they could live without fear. The cities were emptied until all that was left was the dross, the dregs, the poor, and the scum. From launchers in low orbit, multiple tactical nuclear warheads rained down on the inner cityscapes. Millions died. The survivors, torn and twisted by fallout and mutation, held on. These beings were no longer officially classed as human, but life did not leave the cities. The survivors grew in strength and number as more pulled themselves from the rubble. They constructed a radiation prison, a burning chemical nightmare in which gangs were rife and murder commonplace. 2 worlds, but a universe apart, and no one ever crosses between them. It can't be done. Until now.
Which is pretty cool. It makes me wish that other Carmageddon games had a story. At number 4 is Carmageddon 2, Carpocalypse Now, releasing a year after the original and was a huge improvement from the first game, with more detailed damage model, with body panels now being able to fall off, and 3D modeled pedestrians, and activatable power-ups, and being able to buy cars instead of relying on the crappy Steelworthy system from Carmageddon 1. The only thing holding this game back is the missions. They wouldn't be so bad if the missions were fun, but they are far from that. They are boring, have little to no narrative tied to them, extremely difficult and unforgiving, and worst of all, they are needed to progress through the game. Carmageddon TDL also had missions, and they were just as painful, which is a shame, as I would have rated Carmageddon 2 above the original if it wasn't for these missions. But at the end of the day, I would still recommend Carmageddon 2, as there is a mod which makes missions more easier if you still want to try them.
Attention all competitors, this is your 1-minute warning. I repeat, 1 minute to race commencement. Members of the public, you now have 1 minute to reach minimum safe distance. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, fire 'em up!
At number 3 is the game that started it all, Carmagddon 1, which, what can I say except the game was revolution for its massive open air arenas filled with hundreds of interactable pedestrians, a detailed damage system, heaps of cars to choose from, and to top it all off, an unforgettable soundtrack featuring Fear Factory. This game was my introduction to the Carmagddon series and I really enjoyed it, and I can see this game has aged like a fine wine compared to the other games. My only negative for this game is that unlocking other cars is really unpredictable. At the start of each event, one car has a chance to be labelled as steelworthy, and if you wreck it, you unlock it. The only problem with this is that there's no indicator to the player if this mechanic is active, and also has some cars have a 0% chance of ever becoming steelworthy. Besides that minor nitpick, I highly recommend the original Carmagddon. Even if you're not a fan of car combat games, it is played a huge part in developing the 3D open worlds that we take for granted today.
Attention all drivers. This is your 1 minute warning. 1 minute to showtime. Those who are about to die, we salute you.
At number 2 is the newcomer to the Carmagddon series, Carmagddon Rogue Shift, which released this year. Funny enough, Carmagddon Rogue Shift is a rogue shift in the series. Get it? With instead of the game having a set career with different events taking place in different open areas, this game ditches all of that and instead focuses on a randomly generated roguelike campaign taking place in linear races. The game also has mounted guns on the cars in the style of Twisted Metal and replaced pedestrians with zombies, which was pretty controversial among the OG Carmagddon fanbase. Beside all that, I believe Carmagddon Rogue Shift to be a very fun game despite how unconnected its gameplay is compared to the other entries in the series. The roguelike campaign really helps with the replayability, and the car combat feels very fast paced and action packed. The special infected types also make running over zombies way more dynamic, with the boomers that can send your car flying off course if you're not careful. The game additionally features an original dynamic score that changes depending on what's happening on screen, which is a cool addition. My only problem with the game is that the final boss fight encourages one player style, which sort of undermines the choice of perks that the player has. All in all, I highly recommend Rogue Shift to anyone who enjoys these car combat games.
Checkpoint taken.
Checkpoint!
At the number 1 spot is Carmagddon Max Damage, the Kickstarter funded reboot made in 2019 by Stainless Games, and reimagined everything that made the first 2 games great and reimagined them with modern graphics and controls. Out of all the Carmagddon games, this is the one that I recommend the most, as it's the easiest to run on modern systems, always goes on sale for dirt cheap on Steam, has a kick-ass soundtrack featuring dubstep by Morg, the most diverse range of pedestrians featuring pedestrians in wheelchairs, fat pedestrians, hooker pedestrians, non-pedestrians, penguins, and a lot of other stuff. Has a peer-to-peer multiplayer which is very easily to run and use instead of multiplayer games with your friends, hint hint. Has lots of game modes like Checkpoint Stampede, Death Race, Car Crushes, and Fox and Hounds. A diverse range of cars coming from semi-trucks, pickups, wagons, and supercars, heaps of different locations and maps, and to top it off, a community mod made by ST Shotgun, which makes the game even better by improving the driving and crash models and re-adding cut content. Carmagddon Max Damage is probably my top 5 games of all time. Thanks for watching my ranking video. If this video does well, I might make a tutorial on how to play the definitive edition of Carmagddon Max Damage, and maybe a beginner's guide for the series as a whole. Thanks for watching.